9 December 2022, this current wave of load shedding here in South Africa is making life difficult for us, and we really have to plan properly. Since 2 days ago we went up to level 6, which meant that we had up to 4-hour sessions of no power, and then with just about 4 hours between sessions. And that meant that my UPS batteries could not recharge back to full capacity, so it struggled. Today I took a deep breath and I doubled up on the batteries. So let's see. Currently session is going. Apparently it's only 2 hours. I don't know. Lately we don't know when the government says anything, whether you can trust it or not. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the USA and the US empire that is crumbling. If I, a year ago, if I made a statement that said the US empire is crumbling, there would have been thousands that would have taken me on directly. But the reality is, today, you cannot really dispute it. The US is falling apart. I will do a few more Skidmarks about what is going on inside the US, but today I'm just going to do something in an overview of how the US is operating internationally and how people are perceiving the US. Let me say this: if the US empire crash and burn, there is not going to be a large gathering of mourners from the rest of the world. And I'm going to start with this from Conquest Theory. Make no mistake, the United States is in the process of being conquered. Instead of ceding geographical territory to a foreign invading adversary, its citizens are being intellectually colonized from within, as if infected by a mind virus. Now that is big words, and that is very true. If we see what they are doing in their schools today, the shit they are driving into those young minds, it is scary. And then if you look on social media and you look at some of the posts that some of the guys make, you would think that they are living in an altered reality, because some of them are totally unaware of how their society is crumbling around them. The left has celebrated America's strict separation of church and state, but nothing can be further from the truth. As traditional Christian religion has been relegated to the private sphere, something new and sinister has taken its place. And that is a warning. We know what the onslaught on Christianity has been. American institutions have been ideologically captured by a pseudo-religion called wokeism, which is in many ways a form of new Marxism. Now that is an important thing that a guy is saying, and it's a loaded statement, but that's the truth. Look at that Biden administration in the shit house. Look at those people on his staff. It is a fucking disgrace for any conservative person. Any person that has got good moral values must be irritated like hell seeing that. The neutral secular state is a myth. A moral vision will always be imposed, and government, academia and corporations, most notably big tech, are pushing their amoral vision upon the country. And that is true. Look what Facebook is doing. Look what Twitter did. This is, I don't think that the average Western citizen has grasped the fact that operators like the WEF is pushing very hard to destroy morality. They don't want families. A mother, a father and children is something that must be fucking destroyed, according to them. They cannot stand that. And why is that? Because they know a tightly bonded family that has good Christian values is something that they cannot manipulate. This religion takes many forms. Critical race theory, gender ideology, environmental, social and governance, diversity, equity and inclusion, social and emotional learning. The list is never ending, but decline is not inevitable. And that is true. We see how the American society is falling apart, and I don't want to generalize and say all Americans, but a large portion of America are totally immoral and they've got no values. And I have stated it previously, it would be ironic if Russia becomes the final custodian of good Western values. And we saw this past week when Putin passed those laws against the alphabet crowd and the laws against pedophilia and all that shit, and how Blinken jumped on the Russian Duma's case about those laws and that they must vote against it and all of that, and the Duma showed them a middle finger and unanimously approved it. Now listen to this. The US is exploring a new strategy for engaging in armed conflict without direct intervention, using the war in Ukraine as an example. Elements of such a strategy were developed at US military headquarters and agreed upon by policymakers back in 2018 to 2022. This was reported by The Atlantic. The publication's journalists found that providing a high level of military support without the deployment of US forces in a combat area is a new model for how America can understand its military involvement in other parts of the world. Washington has realized that it has become extremely costly and counterproductive to deploy its troops into other countries to ensure US national security. Far greater results could be achieved by avoiding the direct involvement of American soldiers in ground wars. The effectiveness of this strategy is now being tested in the Ukraine. And let's be quite honest, that strategy is fucking failing miserably. But the reality is that the Ukrainians are dying by the thousands. They are being thrown into a meat grinder for American ideology. This is insane. And I cannot understand that the Western taxpayer are allowing their governments to do what they are doing there in the Ukraine. It is absolutely crazy. And I see all these fucking posts where they are bitching about the suffering of the Ukrainians now without water and electricity. But for 8 years their fucking traps were shut while the Americans financed that evil satanic regime in Kiev to bombard the people in the Donbass. They didn't say a word about that. Selective, this is what they are. But they are paying now. They are really paying now for that shit. That is true. And listen to this. Maidan was a fascist movement masquerading as a pro-democracy, pro-Western movement. Essentially, it was the re-emergence of the OUN Banderites, a fascist movement kept alive thanks to the covert support from the US, Britain, Poland and Germany. And this is what the fucking West is doing. They also, in the Middle East, they are financing these absolute, brutal, fucking, amoral criminals to kill and maim the local populations. And the West is financing them. But the shit is going to hit Europe in a big way. The Arabs warned them right in the beginning that all those weapons flowing into Ukraine is going to land, some of it is going to land in the hands of extremists, and pretty soon those weapons will be right across Europe, and the Europeans will see what the Arabs had to live with the past 20 years. Because in the Middle East, the big scourge of the Middle East is the fucking West financing those terrorist organizations. And then listen to this arrogance. The US threatens to arrest ICC judges if they pursue Americans for Afghan war crimes. What the fuck is that? You see, the Americans see themselves above the law. They can go around the globe and kill millions of people, and nobody must question it. They have the right to kill people. As we are speaking here now, children and women is dying in Yemen of hunger and a lack of medicine, and the West is very proud on that achievement. Meanwhile, in New York, illegal Mexican migrants cooking up rats on the street. They've gone from envy of the world to a third world shithole in just a few decades. And how true is that? And then this was fairly disturbing, but the media didn't make much, MSM didn't make much of this. I saw these, a few posts like this on Telegram. 5 cars rented by President Joe Biden's Secret Service detail for his Thanksgiving weekend trip to Nantucket mysteriously burst into flames a day after he left, according to the reports. Footage of the burned out rental vehicles in a car park in Nantucket Memorial Airport was obtained by the Nantucket Current. Now, someone asked me about it and said, what do I think about it? I personally believe this was a message to Biden. We can get to you if we want to. I may be wrong. And then listen to this fucking arrogance. Russia wants negotiations. Here is the starting point. Russia must withdraw all its troops from the Ukraine, period. US Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman. Who the fuck does this woman think she is to make a statement like that? What is going to happen next? Is the Americans going to pack up all their fucking bases and fuck off back to their country and go and sort their own country out? No. They will keep on bombing the rest of the world. But they are getting to the end of the rope. The rest of the world has had enough of their shit. Enough. Between Russia, China, Iran, India, and North Korea. They are going to fuck the Americans up. Listen to what I'm saying. The Americans, there are a large portion of Americans think that the American military is invincible. Just remember, with modern technology in missiles, that huge aircraft carrier that you see as an iron fist that can fuck everything up on the globe, that thing is a floating coffin. And then that's from Jackson Hinkle. There are too many MAGA infiltrators who stand with CIA pedophiles, Ukraine and Britain instead of the courageous people of America, Russia, Syria, DPRK, Iran and China. I'm not a big fan of this guy. I think he is very arrogant and I think he is deliberately challenging the social media platforms. And I have seen a few of his programs which was so clearly plagiarized from other news services. And then he pushed it out as breaking news. Then we have this, the Federation Council Speaker Valentina Matvinenko. Russia has been seeking it for a long time and finally a decision has been made to lift sanctions and allow Russia to send more than 200,000 tons of mineral fertilizer as humanitarian aid to African countries to maintain. Now, what I'm going to say about this is who the fuck gave the collective West the right to prevent Russia from supplying their fertilizers to Africa? Where do they get that fucking right from? To deny the African farmers a good crop. I cannot understand this. I will never accept it And I am glad, I'm unfortunately a little bit of the old guy, but I am glad that this American empire is beginning to crumble. And then we have this. Suckering Europeans into war with Russia, blowing up Nord Stream pipelines, Inflation Reduction Act, soaring energy and food prices, the assault on the German economy, European political class is a little late understanding that US policy is and has always been America first. And that is so in your face. The Americans has openly trashed the European economy, and now they're stealing all the industries, and the Europeans are sitting on their hands fast asleep. And this is very fucking disturbing. Exclusive. Biden administration weighs Ukrainian request for access to US stockpile of controversial cluster munitions. This is what the fucking Satanist Ukraine military is doing. They are blikseming cluster ammunitions down on the Donbass. That Donbass area has been shot with those petal mine clusters, and children are maimed from that mines. But the West doesn't say a word. They finance the fuckers to do more of that, and now they want to give them more cluster ammunitions. It will be actually a good thing if Russia just loses their cool and blows that fucking Western Ukraine with a few thermobaric missiles. And then we have this. I hope Richard and Miles and Penny Wong have enough common sense to know what's really going on here. Blinken said China is dangerous. In what way, Blinken? USA invaded 50 nations since World War II, and China invaded no nations. They are peaceful. USA is not. Get out, USA. This is really something that you have to accept. The USA is a global terrorist. And then there's this. The question is, if 200,000 Russians were blatantly crossing Ukraine's border every month, would Biden send our military to intervene? If yes, then why isn't he doing it here? And that is from what is happening on America's borders. Look at that. Americans better wake up. That government is busy selling you out. The big thing is, you must understand, the onslaught is against white people. The WEF don't want to see white people. The Kalergi plan was great. They don't want white people. They only want coloreds. Now listen to this. The price ceiling on Russian oil has blown many of the floodgates open. There is no market, no rules, just Uncle Sam's notions. Chaos in the world economy has already been predicted by most unengaged experts. The big question is how to save Europe's economy, which the US has simply crushed by pushing its geopolitical, national, and more precisely, vested interests. That is the truth, and I cannot understand who in his right fucking mind thought that they can tell a producer country at what price that country can sell its product. And the answer, imagine, has been found. There will be oil in the EU, but stolen and at triple the price. Turkey's Dik Gazette highlights this. President Erdogan wouldn't mind creating an international hub in Turkey to resell Russian hydrocarbons. The decision on gas for the EU has already been made. There is already a winner and a loser in the war in Ukraine, writes the publication. The US won, the EU lost definitively when it agreed to accept its price ceiling on Russian oil imposed by the States. It simply will not be there. But the smuggling of stolen oil from the Middle East is organized by the Pentagon from territories where the US has destroyed statehood. Since the Arab Spring, there has been oil fields in Egypt, Syria, Yemen, and Libya under the control of militants supervised by Washington. Let that sink in. Think about it. The US is stealing millions of barrels of oil per day in the Middle East. Official Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Liyan also spoke out about the illegal oil smuggling by the US, particularly from Syria, by dozens of tankers. He estimated the damage to the country at $100 billion. The US Army takes oil from northern Syria to its bases in northern Iraq. This is illegal. The United States has no right to keep the army in Syria at all. What price ceiling will the US charge the EU for smuggled oil? The prices will definitely be much higher than Russian and world prices in general. Where there is theft, there is speculation. Remember that. Take note of that. That is how this fucking US is operating. They are a global terror organization. And then we get this. Thanks to the sadistic US sanctions, many Syrian children have no fuel for heat in the winter time and are only eating once a day. Listen to that. But the US don't give a fuck because this is most brown people. And then we get this. This Joel Rayburn posted, Assad's economy and state are collapsing. No fuel, no electricity, no commerce. Streets is empty. Assad just prints money to pay salaries. Results inflation making basic needs unaffordable. Pound crashes to 5,900 per dollar, making imports impossible. And then this woman says, what kind of a cruel person celebrates children being hungry and cold to accomplish a delusional imperialist policy goals? It is frightening, and I think I'm going to stop now because I'm getting very hot under the collar. The reality is that the rest of the world has had enough of the West and specifically of the USA. If I see what MBS is doing now in Saudi with Xi Jinping, it's quite clear. The Saudis has made their decision, they're moving east. The West is going to find them isolated and poor by within, I would say, about 6 months' time. The petrodollar is going to crash, and then you have to think what it's going to do to the American economy. Hopefully the good American people will wake up, saddle up, go to Washington and throw those fucking political cretins into jail cells on an isolated island where they cannot contact anybody. Remove them out of society. Thank you for your support. Please give me a subscribe, give me a like, and share the thing. Have a great evening.